Welcome to the next part of our section on thinking. In this video, we're going to focus on some of the thinking habits that we can fall into. One of the previous tasks was to notice what habits you're in with your own thinking. Can you remember what you wrote down? Pause the video and flick to exercise 2 on the thinking worksheet. Maybe you wrote down that you're often hard on yourself, or that you worry about the worst case scenario. We're going to spend some time just now focusing on some common thinking habits we can fall into. Some of them may feel quite familiar to you. I know some of them are very familiar to me. So some of the habits that we can be in with our thinking. The first one we have here is all or nothing thinking. This is where things are only ever seen as black or white. There are no shades of grey. One mistake is thought of as total failure. Everything has to be perfect or not done at all. The next is overgeneralization. Here, one unfortunate event leads to the assumption that it will happen every time. However, realistically, there's no justification for seeing one instance as proving the rule. So the example might be, nothing ever goes right for me when we make one small mistake or suffer some misfortune. The next is jumping to conclusions. Here the person is completely convinced that something's true without looking at all the evidence. For example, I must be boring. My friend cut our telephone conversation short. Or, I'm not able to exercise anymore because my pain flared up after doing the stretches with the physio last week. Double standards. Here the person expects a higher standard for himself or herself than they would for anyone else. They'll be more forgiving with others in the same situation than they are with themselves. For example, I should have pushed myself harder to do the things I'd planned, ignoring that some pressing matter arose that you couldn't plan for but had to deal with. Maybe your pain flared. At the same time, you praise a friend for having managed to do just a few things that he'd planned in similar circumstances. Predicting the future. Here the person thinks that they know what will happen without questioning their prediction, assuming that their thought is the only possible thing that can happen. For example, if I go to a party where I don't know anyone, nobody will talk to me. Or, I'll never have another good day again. Mind reading is another habit that we can fall into. This is where we make instant judgments about what you think other people are thinking or feeling when there's no evidence. It just seems right. Normally, the person expects constant negative evaluation from others. This often involves imagining other people are thinking or feeling the same way that you do about things. He thinks I'm stupid when someone asks if they can do something to help you. Or I can tell by the way they're looking at me that they don't believe me. Unfair comparisons. This is when we tend to compare ourselves with ideals. Ourselves 20 years ago, our friend who's not got chronic health problems, instead of a fairer comparison such as ourselves last week or last month or last year. Next one involves a tendency to relate everything that's happening around us to ourselves. It's called personalisation. So it's that sense that we're responsible for things that are probably out with our control. So an example would be two people laughed when I walked into the room and I think they're probably commenting to each other on my appearance. Or I might have the thought, the problems at home are all my fault. The next one is emotional reasoning. This involves taking your feelings as facts. So I feel afraid, so there must be something bad about to happen. Should statements. This is when life is based on high, unrealistic expectations. We use words like should, ought to, must, mustn't. Examples would be, I'm not working, so I should do all the housework. Or, my friends should understand how much pain I'm in. Or, I must not let people down. Next one is a mental filter. So there's a link between our emotions and our memories. When we feel a certain way, our mind brings up memories of times when we felt a similar emotion. So if we're angry, we can easily remember other times we felt angry about the same thing. This can sometimes lead us to think this always happens or my life is all bad. An example would be, I couldn't play with my son yesterday or today, therefore I'm a terrible parent. Or, I didn't get invited to the last night out. I'm left out of everything. The last one is ignoring the positive and emphasizing the negative. I had a great day out, but it doesn't matter because I'll be in agony tomorrow. It's that tendency to remember the piece of criticism or the negative thing that happened and forget all the compliments or all the achievements or all the positive things that happened. We have to remember that our brain is trying to help us when it creates these shortcuts, but really it's not that helpful. Here's a quote that we feel is a good reminder that we can't always trust our thoughts. It says, I used to think the human brain was the most wonderful organ in the body. Then I realised who was telling me this. You see, we can't always trust our thoughts. On the worksheet, take a moment to read over that list of thinking habits and mark the ones you notice being a frequent habit for you. Thoughts are not always facts. You could think that the grass is blue, you could even imagine it, draw it, say it out loud. However, it's not a fact. It's useful to remember that our thoughts are often biased or distorted in some way. We're in habits with our thinking. But recognizing those habits in our thinking can help us to understand how they influence how we feel and how we behave, and then start to make changes.